Okay, so I've put together a little demonstration of how I would go about doing some cooldowns. So basically, you see, we click on a thing and we get a cooldown counting. This one it's 8 seconds, this one's 30, this one's 4. And you see, they all count down individually, and when they run out, you can activate the skill again. As you can see, it is actually still clicking the button, but it's not actually triggering them. But if I do want to go, Mr. Griffo did skill 1. I've just called them skill 1, skill 2, skill 3, skill 4. I imagine you'll have a lot more complicated way of setting up the cooldowns and what skills they have. So this script I'm going to go into first. It's just um, this is to set up so that I can make a facsimile of what you was trying to do. And this one is just like, so we're just getting the players, and then when the player added, I'm giving them a bunch of int values, one for the 2 int values for each skill. So one is the actual cooldown, and one is the what it will be set to each time. So skill 1 is 15, and then we are using the button names to actually trigger the skill, so that each skill is each one. Presumably you'll have different skills that different characters or different people can select, so you'll just make it so that the buttons change their names to those when they select those skills. Right, so what we got here in the local script, I've done it this way. You can have the time as the label could be made in the starter GUI, but you've done it with a texting, so I've stuck with that method. You've got I'm getting the players and replicated storage because we want the event for firing the skills, and obviously getting the local player, of course. Then we're going to cycle through all the buttons that are in this frame, and if it is a button, then we're going to make it so that if the person clicks that button, it fires the event, and it also passes the name of the button as the skill that's being triggered. This is just so that we can see what's going on. And then here we have the timer, because you called it timer. I was just stuck with that. It's the text label. We set up all its bits. I've changed the transparency to 0, because I presume you want to see it. I don't know, but yeah, I changed that to 0. And yeah, we parent it to the button. I'm not quite sure why you parent it here. I would actually stick this in after all of this. In fact, it was like the last thing we do in this whole section, yeah, in here. So that's where I would have that. Okay, using the font, the text scaled, yeah, all that's good. And then I'm also adding another event in here. This is if the timer value. So that's basically going to get the cooldown of the value that's on the player. So if we come back in here, we've got the time value, player, wait for child, button name. Okay, so we're going to find that cooldown. It's going to be named the same thing as the skill the button is. So that's how we're going to use that to find it. I mean, you can come up with a different method if that's what you'd prefer. But this is a nice, easy way of doing each one to each one. So then now we've got that. We have to do a wait for child because obviously it's being added by another script. Players get added at different times, all that kind of business. So it does have to marry up with something. Timer value.change. So we're going to go off the event when this int value gets its value changed. It will trigger the changed event, and we'll then say if that change, if the time value is more than 0, then it's going to make it visible because we're initializing it invisible, but not visible. And then we're going to make the text the value of the int value. If it's not, so basically if it's 0, then, or somehow it's been reduced to less than 0 or something like that, because you may have some things that reduce cooldowns on moves, that kind of business, just to make sure. So if it's 0 or less than 0, then we're going to make it not visible, and then you can see the button again. Yeah, and that runs as an event any time that this value changes. So then we can also, so coming back here, so you see we're triggering the event when you click it. Let's go to that handling script. This is just another script in server script service, and we're getting the replicated storage so we can get the skill event, and players so that we can handle player stuff. I'm not sure if I need that now I think about it, but you'll probably have it in there. There's going to be a lot more going on in your game. Um, so I've made two functions, and these two functions are actually being triggered by the same event. Um, this way it saves you doing coroutines or any other kind of business like that. You can just have your your cooldown counter going, and you can have your event, your actual skill can have various weights and stuff in, and it's not going to mess around with the countdown going on. They'll run in their own threads. Um, Much better way of doing it this way. Not always applicable. You don't always want to be doing this kind of thing. Quite often, it's better to just have one function running from one event. But in this situation, this is a better way of doing it because we want them to run in two separate threads. And okay, so let's look at the cooldown part of it. So when the event's fired, so if we just come back to this for a second, no, this one for a second. We're looking at this as skill event, fire server, button name. Okay, so what we're actually handling is the player and the button name as the thing. So when we go to this one, we see we get the player and what I'm calling skill here. So that'll be a string that is the name of the skill. So then we're going to look for the skill cooldown. So, we're looking at the player for something called skill. And then if that skill cooldown is value 0, then we're going to actually start the cooldown, because basically you don't want to start the cooldown over and over again if you click it again. If the cooldown's already started, you can't do anything to it till it's run out completely. We're doing the same thing with the actual trigger as well. Okay, so skill cooldown dot value equals. So the first thing we're doing, if it is 0, first thing we're doing is setting this value to the cooldown amount, like the amount that we've set in here. So this one, so if it's skill 1 here, it'll be 15. Yep, so just making that one, and then while it's greater than 0, we're going to count down one at a time. Skill value -1. Brilliant. And in here we've got the actual triggering of the skill. Same thing, get the player and the skill. Same thing's being handed. It's exactly the same event that's being fired at the same time here. And if the player find first child skill, so basically this one's the same skill cooldown, but we've got to find it again. I haven't bothered assigning it to a variable because literally we're only using it here, but you may want to, depending on how much stuff you're doing. So if it's equal to 0, then we make the skill fire. So obviously I've just got a print statement. You'd have your actual skill go off, however it's called. Presumably you'd have some sort of logic system to pick the correct skill. Yeah, I hope all that makes sense. Quick look at it again. Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, please let me know if you have any questions.